I just want to give you an overview of how we crafted the data management plan that was our winning submission. First, we signed up and located the template in the data management tool, plan tool. And then I attended data management work, dropping hours with Fernando. And that was like a back and forth about like 3 times, I think, where Fernando gave me his suggestions and I looked in with the team. And then we finalized and published the data management inside the tool itself, which made it really easy. And I heard back from the team in about a month from FASEB. I want to say that in my perspective, involving a data librarian in your data management planning is like having a reviewer for your peer-reviewed paper. Only it is a collaborative process and you will never be rejected. A data librarian is going to be there to empower you and to give you not just feedback, but their expertise in whatever type of research you're doing.
I get DMP requests at a few different levels. I tend to get them a little bit more early in the process where people are looking at the questions that their agency has asked. There are 5 or 6 in the case of the new DMS plan, 6 sections or elements that they're supposed to fill out, and they're trying to figure out how to interpret what they should put in. And so they throw a lot of information at me. And then I say, thank you, that was really interesting. You told me a lot about your research and your questions and your methods and your bench or your field work or your clinical bedside or what motivated you, but you didn't tell me a lot about your data. That's a general, very, very general statement. Let's back up and think about after you have written it down, your nurse has written it down on your chart, or after you have written it down in your lab notebook, electronic or paper, how does it become something that you can then say, give me a t-test or an ANOVA or regression or whatever. And so I usually walk them back through it with a slightly different approach. That's my most common experience, which is maybe not quite what you asked about reviewing DMPs, but a little bit more about consulting on writing them.
I do see a lot of different kinds and different levels of proficiency in writing DMPs. From different disciplines. And I think that I've noticed, at least lately, that the quality that I've seen coming through across my desk has increased. I don't know if that correlates with increased resources from the NIH and others on how to write these, but I think it's a good thing. But the thing that I tend to see the most in a DMP, or that I don't tend to see, is really a lack of specificity on kind of some of the nuts and bolts on how things are going to be managed and shared. So people might say, I'm going to share this at when the paper's published, but really lack details around, okay, where is it going to go? Who's going to be responsible for making this happen? And are there any issues around confidentiality or copyright? I think, as a former researcher myself, it's not something that I really thought about much before, right? Like how does potential data agreements affect my ability to share the results from my own research? So it's thinking through details of things like that. I think, once you know that they exist, they're kind of like, oh yeah, duh. But if you've never done this before, if you've never thought about it before, that's kind of where some of these resources and experts are around to help kind of bring those things to the surface.
Well, again, I'm your beginner. This is somebody who just this was my first NIH submission. And so we were just kind of flying blind through it. And so, it was like, well, you need to do a data management sharing plan. I'm like, well, what the heck is that? Let me figure that out. And then I found there's a tool to help you do it. And I was like, literally, you just walk through it and helps you do it. It helps you think through what you need to do. And so, and this was, a couple years back, so I'm a little fuzzy on it in terms of the details, but I don't remember it being difficult at all. It was sort of self-explanatory, and it was great to have that as a resource because, I didn't have a whole lot of time, like you said, in the middle of doing a grant application, right? To figure out, let me go do a lit review and learn about this and figure out what all this is and look at best practices and all that kind of stuff. So I was super grateful for having the resource available. And that's coming from somebody who's, super novice. And ours was fairly simple, what we were proposing. It wasn't like a huge data set or anything we were looking for. But I just found it to be, you could do it. Even if you didn't really know what you were doing, you could do it.
Would it be accurate for me to say, don't overthink it to people?
Yeah, I think listening to Fernando, I think the other thing is some of the thing, and, reaching out to your data librarian is a good idea because you're thinking as the researcher about what data you want to capture, but you do need to think through where's it going to live, who's going to manage it, what happens, what's the process for someone to get to it, then if you're talking about a data use agreement, there's other people you have to pull in to be sure you've got the legal people signed off on that. So you do need to think about things probably beyond just, okay, what are my variables that I'm trying to capture here? And I think, having some guidance on that piece of it, and probably doing it not when you're in the middle of a submission is a good idea.
If I can kind of just follow on that last sentiment that, it's your plan. One of the big benefits of thinking through this at the beginning is for the benefit of the person doing the research as well, right? It's not just for the NIH to see, oh yeah, you did it, check. It's really, a big benefit, and maybe Damian has something to add here too from his experience, but just in working with people drafting the DMPs, it's always interesting to see kind of, the wheels turning sometimes when they are actually asked a question that addresses maybe something they didn't think of. It's like, oh yeah, maybe that's probably good that I'm thinking about this now rather than at the very end when I need to find a repository to share my data. On getting back to a little bit of what Monica put there in the chat at the end there about them feeling generic. I think, one thing that is very easy to do, and I don't blame researchers for doing this, is, asking their colleague for their data management plan and, kind of tweaking it to their needs. On one hand, I understand that researchers are very busy, and this makes a lot of sense. And one request that we get a lot from researchers at the U of A is for, do you have a template that I can just fill in my blanks and send it through? And while I appreciate the need for that, on a personal level, I've resisted that because it kind of promotes that that workflow that becomes generic. So then, NIH starts seeing basically the same DMP coming through their desk, and that I think personally doesn't paint a good picture on grants coming from the U of A if they start seeing that. Because I think it might give that perception that it hasn't really been thought through. It's just been kind of fill in the blank.